Yesterday, July 4th, was the hottest day on record for our planet. So our program this evening can help us continue to move forward in dealing with that issue and the issue of climate change. So we're happy to host these folks, and Pat Bekoff has helped plan this, and we'll introduce our speakers. Please know that we would like you to remain muted and with your camera off during the program, and do make sure that you leave your questions till the end. So Pat, take it away.
Hi, happy post July the 4th. We're very excited to be bringing to you John Freitag is Executive Director of the Geothermal Alliance of Illinois. That's that state trade association for geothermal heat pump industry. He's a 32-year plus veteran of the electric utility industry, retiring from the Illinois Electric Cooperative in 2017. He was instrumental in starting this alliance in 2008. He lives in Springfield, where his home, he has geothermal heating and cooling since 1999. He's also an advocate for energy efficiency and renewable energy. He has solar, rooftop, PVC on his system on his home for the past 10 years. And he serves on numerous boards and currently a member of the Board of Trustees of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois. We're very excited to welcome him and his panelists that he will be introducing as well. Thank you, John.
Okay, we ready to roll?
Yes.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here tonight. I wish we could have been in person, but that's one of those things, and I'm looking forward to being at a future event of the Green Drinks. Maybe sometime later in the year, we can do this again. So you see the slide up here. These are the three organizations that are collaborating on this program. It's fairly new. My group, the Geothermal Alliance of Illinois, Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, and the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, MREA. And speaking of MREA, we've got Jeff Schneider from MREA, who is my cohort in this program, and Jeff's online here tonight. We'll be helping kind of behind the scenes a little bit. And then also along with me and monitoring the chat will be a fellow named Dave Buss, who probably knows more about geothermal heat pump technology than anyone else I know, period. And Dave has been around this for an awfully long time, put in his first system in the early 1980s. I can never remember what year. I think he said 1982, but Dave is really deep in the weeds expert on geothermal, and Dave will be monitoring the chat tonight. So if you have some techie questions about geothermal technology, you ask them in the chat, and I guarantee you'll get an answer from the expert. And then maybe at the end, we'll go over some of those questions again if we have time, and you can ask some in person, and we'll get Dave in here live. So here are the contractors in this program. We've got 7 of them, and it's everything from Area Mechanical and Gillies Heating and Cooling in Rockford to we've got a couple in the southwest suburbs, a couple in the northern suburbs, and then another contractor, L&H Services, down in Beecher in the way out southern suburbs down by Kankakee. So that's our program. And we think it has a lot of merit. These contractors, we've done all we can to vet them and ensure absolute excellence. They're all certified contractors of our group, the Geothermal Alliance of Illinois. That doesn't mean that they've got one technician who holds the credential. That means that their company holds the credential. There's a big difference, and that's the thing that we do to ensure the highest quality possible. So here's today's agenda. I'm not going to read all these slides. You can read them, but this is basically going to be a Geothermal 101. And then we're going to drop in there. We want to hit the highlights, and then we want to drop in some information about the Grow Geothermal Chicagoland program and how you can get involved with this technology. So what's a geothermal group buy? Well, simply a group buy follows the NREL model, the National Renewable Energy Laboratories model. And you all probably have heard these group buys for solar PV systems. And I don't know how many of these are operating around the state. We started our first geothermal group buy in Urbana, Illinois, about 2.5, give or take, years ago, with the city of Urbana. And that was the very first geothermal group buy that I know of anywhere on earth. We've had some success with that program in the little over 2 years. We're now in our 3rd year of that program. We subsequently started a second program with an electric co-op, Geothermal Energy, up in northwestern Illinois, up in the Galena area. And you see that on the map. And then the third program is the Grow Geothermal Chicagoland, which is much different from the other two, only if and only scale, period. It's just such a large amount of people in such a large geographic area. So the numbers are really different on this program. Those are the first 3 geothermal group buy programs that I know of, and the only ones that I know of on planet Earth. And so hopefully this is a model that'll take off, and but it got started in Illinois. So here's some details about the program. We started, I guess we kicked off, give or take, about April 1st, early April. So this is a real new program. We've done about a half a dozen of these power hour sessions, both in person and virtually. And program runs to the end of the year. My hunch is that we're going to have pretty good success with it. Then there will be a year 2 for the program, but that's details for down the road. So why do we want to think about geothermal heating and cooling? And why do we want to promote the technology? Well, it's the most efficient technology known to mankind today. Don't take my word for that. That comes from the US EPA. And you'll see as we go through this presentation that it not only is the most efficient heating and cooling technology, it's the most efficient heating and cooling technology available today by far. And it is the most environmentally friendly heating and cooling technology and most comfortable heating and cooling technology that you can have for your home or business. And like we said at the beginning, I've had it in my own home for 24 years now. And my wife will tell you that it is the most comfortable heating and cooling technology she's ever been around. So this is a Geothermal 101. We're going to tell you how the technology works. And I like to start with this picture because this tells me that it's heating season, because these folks have long sleeves on and sweaters, warm shirts, but you notice they're barefoot. They look pretty comfortable, and that's what I like about this picture. And this illustrates the comfort of geothermal heating and cooling. So we know if you go around the country, geothermal's called many different things. You get out in the New England area, out east, they tend to use the term ground source heat pump. That's fine. It's all the same stuff. We just refer to it as geothermal in Illinois because that's what people know it by. And no, it's not Old Faithful. You don't need Old Faithful. It's not high temperature geothermal. It's moderate temperature geothermal, typically accessing the Earth's free energy through a system of piping in the ground. Geothermal heat pump technology produces on-site renewable energy. Don't take that from me, take that from the federal government, the US EPA and the Department of Energy. They refer to geothermal as renewable energy. And some people would say, well, how can geothermal, which uses electricity, be renewable energy? Well, it's renewable energy because we're using the Earth's free energy. We're just using electricity to move that energy. And so if you remember anything from tonight's presentation, and this is pretty simple, but just remember that geothermal, while it is somewhat complicated technology compared to conventional stuff, really does simply 2 things: pumps water and blows air, and it pumps water and blows air to take advantage of the Earth's free energy. And so how do we do that? Well, we know that, and I'm looking out the window right now, and it's pretty dark outside. So we must be having some lightning going on. And you've probably heard we've had a lot of electric utility issues in Springfield the past week. We still have about 5% of folks down here that are out of power. We had a big windstorm last Thursday, and they're still recovering from that. But we know that the Earth's a vast solar collector, and that I can tell you that probably most of the day my solar array was chugging along at 100% for probably 5 hours today. And even yet at this time of night, it's producing something. And even on the darkest, dreariest days of November and December every year, those gray, short days, even on those days, my solar array makes some energy. Doesn't make as much as does on a day like today, but it makes some. And so the Earth is a vast solar collector. And every day of the year, 365 days of the year, the Earth is collecting that solar energy, and we're taking advantage of that with geothermal heat pumps. This is an important slide because this shows why we are absolutely in the sweet spot for geothermal. So I can tell you that my incoming water temperatures with my geothermal system are right in the 53 to 54 degree range on a pretty much a year-round basis. And why is that important? Or why is it significant? And why is it a good thing? And why are we in the sweet spot? Well, we know that in central Illinois, and you folks in northern Illinois are probably in the low 50 range, 50 degree range for your earth temperatures. And why is that a good thing? Well, it's a good thing for taking advantage of for geothermal because we're heating and cooling in our part of the country. We're probably 60, 65% heating, 40, 35%, give or take, cooling. And we go back and forth. In the summer, of course, we toggle into cooling, which is important on a day like today. It's pretty warm here in central Illinois. And then, we can take advantage of the earth for heating in the winter. And so we've got this nice source of a constant heat sink in the low to mid 50 temperature range that we can take advantage of in our part of the country. Consider if you were in southern Texas or southern Florida, the earth is a lot warmer there, maybe as close as 15 to 20 degrees warmer. And what are we trying to do in that part of the country? We're trying to reject heat into the ground, and the earth is already way warmer. So that's a much less efficient exchange of energy. It's tougher to reject heat into the ground when the ground is already much warmer. And conversely, just the opposite. If we were in northern Minnesota or southern Canada, geothermal works just fine up there. But what are we doing there? Are we doing much cooling? Heck no, we're doing mostly heating, probably 9 months of the year. We're in heating mode. And the earth is already quite a bit cooler, at least 10 degrees cooler than it is in northern Illinois. And so we're trying to take more heat out of the ground that's already cooler than it is here. And so it's a little bit tougher exchange. We're in the absolute sweet spot in the middle of the part of the country of the US for taking advantage of geothermal technology. And so we know that the earth is a source of heating in the winter. And it's a place that we can reject heat in the summer. And that's what cooling really is. It's a rejection of heat. And we do this with geothermal technology, typically in most systems through a series of sealed underground pipes that look just like this. This is an exact piece of piping with fluids circulating through it. And it's naturally warmed or cooled by the earth, depending on whether we're in heating season or cooling season. Here's an important slide, and my friend Dave Buss, who's monitoring the chat tonight, likes to say, if I asked you to give me $1 and and then I told you I'd give you $5 back in return, would you do that? And of course, everybody would do that. And that's really what geothermal does. For every $1 of energy that you buy from the electric utility, for most of us ComEd, you get $5, $6 probably worth of energy back. And why do you get that? Well, you get that because we're using the earth's free energy. We're just paying for a little bit of electricity to move it. Now, a lot of people, probably some even on this meeting, in this meeting tonight, think that this is really new technology. Well, you heard me say that Dave put his system in, his first system in the early 80s. I've had geothermal in my own home since 1999. I went to work for the electric co-ops in a building that was heated and cooled with geothermal in 1985. So the technology's been around a long time. And some of you would even remember Life magazine. Well, this issue of Life magazine from the fall of 1948 had this article on the fireless furnace. For all intents and purposes, this was the first geothermal. These were the first geothermal systems. Kind of crude compared to today, very crude. And they made a lot of mistakes and they learned what worked and didn't work. But over the years, the technology has really gotten much more efficient to the point where we're at today with 500 to 600% efficiency for the top of the line geothermal systems. Just incredible technology and incredible efficiency. So everybody's heard of a heat pump. Probably not all of you have heard of geothermal heat pumps, but you've all heard of heat pumps. And if you've heard of heat pumps, you probably have heard of an air source heat pump. And so what's an air source heat pump and how does it compare to a geothermal heat pump? Well, both of them basically move energy from one location to the other, much like a refrigerator. If you pull your refrigerator out and put your hand down at the bottom of the back of the refrigerator and it's still running, what do you feel? You feel heat. So what's going on there? The refrigerator is rejecting heat into your conditioned space of your home. Geothermal and air source heat pumps work much the same way. An air source heat pump sits on a pad outside and it heats in the winter. It's trying to take heat out of the outside air. Even if it's 5 degrees, it's working hard, but it can get some heat unit out of that air, believe it or not. It just has to work incredibly hard to do it. Geothermal is much more efficient, does the same thing. It takes heat, but it takes heat out of the ground. And remember, there's no season underground. It's always the same on a year-round basis. Probably in Northern Illinois, 50, 51 degrees, 51, maybe 52, I don't know, something like that. And so geothermal is such a much more efficient exchange, and that's why it's so much more efficient than an air source heat pump. And it's by far the most efficient heating and cooling technology available today. So the next two slides describe the 4 circuits of every geothermal system. And they're all important, and it's important to know that they all have to work and collaborate together, work together, but they're all completely separate from one another. So there's 4 circuits. The first circuit is the distribution circuit. In most of our homes, this is ductwork. So this is the ductwork that circulates the cool air in the summer and the warm air in the winter to heat and cool your home. In some homes, this might be piping for a radiant heat system, but for most of us, it's ductwork. The second circuit is the refrigeration circuit, and this is a circuit that's inside the actual geothermal unit that sits in your utility space, your crawl space, your basement, wherever you have your heating cooling system. You'll see some pictures of my geothermal system in a few moments, and it looks much like a furnace, only it has some piping connected to it. The third system is the ground loop circuit, and basically it's this piping, looks just like this, buried in the ground. I'll tell you about mine in a moment. And it's piping. My loop field is 175 feet deep. It's in my front yard, right behind where I'm sitting right now. Probably the first loop is 15 feet from where I sit out in the front yard. And then the fourth circuit is the hot water circuit. And this is not on every geo system, but it's on most residential systems. And why is it important? Well, it's important because it provides free or subsidized hot water. And why is that important? Well, heating domestic hot water in most homes is the second largest user of energy, right behind heating and cooling. And in some homes, it can be as much as 20% of the energy usage. And it's a free byproduct of every geothermal system, or can be. So it's important to have the hot water circuit installed. Now, as I mentioned, each of these circuits is closed and sealed from the others, but it's important that they all work together and the energy transfers from one circuit to the other, but the fluids don't intermingle. So the fluids in my loop field out in my front yard behind where I sit, those fluids don't intermingle with the water that goes to my water heater. Neither of them intermingle with the refrigerant in my geosystem. They're all completely separate and sealed, but it's important that they work together. This one is a little redundant, but it's important, so I like to repeat it. And so if you buy a kilowatt hour of energy from ComEd or whatever your electric utility is, you get 5 units of electricity, or the equivalent of 5 kilowatt hours of energy out of that, because most of it's free. We're just paying to move it. This is actually my system on the south side of Springfield. You'll see my inside system there in the left side picture. Looks very much like a standard furnace system, except you'll notice those pipes that are connected to it, the insulated pipes, black pipes, and going to the bottom, one in, one back out to the loop field in my front yard. And then you see that little black box with a red circle on it. That's my flow center, or my pumping system that pumps the fluid through the loop field. So that system sits about 10 feet from me right now, in my lower level of my home. And then you see the front of my house. This is on the south side of Springfield. And in my front yard, right from the azalea bush and that evergreen there, right in that corner of the house, right down to the lower right of the picture, that's where my loop field is. My loop field looks exactly like this, except my loop field is 175 feet deep in my front yard. It was installed in 1999, and it's been chugging along ever since, working just great. And if you see under the picture there on the left, that's where my office is. That's where I'm sitting right now. So when we talk about efficiency, and remember, geothermal is the most efficient heating and cooling technology available today by far. We rate our equipment in 2 ways. One way for cooling, one way for heating. In cooling, we rate by energy efficiency ratio, or EER. Probably most of you haven't heard of that. But the higher the rating, the better. You probably have heard of SEER, or SEER. That stands for Seasonal Energy Efficiency Ratio. We don't use that with geothermal because, again, geothermal knows no season. Underground, it's the same year-round, never changes. So we've got a much more efficient base on which to operate. And then in heating mode, we rate by coefficient of performance, or COP. Again, the higher the rating, the better, the more efficient. So in cooling, again, we rate in EER, and you see the newer systems now are north of 30 EER, and that is really good. And you see how it compares to an ordinary central air conditioner system, or a very basic old school air source heat pump on the yellow bar. I mean, there's no comparison, at least 3 times the efficiency. And then in heating mode, this is where geothermal really, really shines, with COPs north of 5.0. And you see how that compares on the other end of the spectrum to the old school 80% efficient gas furnace or gas boiler. And it's absolutely no contest. You can't even really compare the two. So what's the heart of the geothermal system? Well, it's the geothermal loop field. And for most systems, we use a closed loop system. Now, there are some open loop systems in Illinois, and I'll spend a little time on that, but not much, because they aren't all that common. Most have a closed loop system like mine. Remember, mine has my loop field is 3 175 footers, just exactly like this, except the pipings, instead of 18 inches from top to bottom, is 175 feet deep. And that's connected to my geothermal system that's 10 feet from me. And it's a vertical geosystem. And I would say in Illinois, of all our geothermals installed in our state, probably 85+% are vertical loop field systems. And why is this? Well, for the most part, most of us don't have a big yard. Most of us have existing homes with finished yards, and it's just the easiest, best way to get a loop field into a rather compact space with the least amount of damage to our yards, existing yards. And so what does this look like? Well, on installation day for the loop field, drilling rig that looks much like a water well rig comes in, drills a 5-inch hole typically, and drills to the prescribed depth, inserts the piping into the hole. And as soon as that's done, that hole is backfilled with bentonite grout. Why is this important? It's important for 2 reasons. Number one, we want to seal that borehole because that's a potential path for contamination to our groundwater, and we don't want that. So the bentonite grout seals it better than the earth did itself. And that's number one. Number 2 is the conductivity. What needs to happen underground? Well, we want to dissipate the heat in the earth. We want to spread that heat out in the summertime when we're rejecting heat into the earth. And in the wintertime, we want to draw that heat into the fluid that circulates through this piping. And bentonite grout does that very, very well. So what does this loop installation look like when it's being put in? This is a loop field that was being installed in Urbana about 4 or 5 weeks ago. This was a really neat and clean job. That was the house there, the blue home, where they were putting geothermal in. This was in a suburban neighborhood of Urbana. Really neat, clean job. And I'm going to guess that within a week or so, with the exception of a small area in that front yard, you could hardly see a scar on that lawn. And probably by now they've already got grass seed maybe planted. They're probably waiting a little bit for the earth to settle. But, it makes a little bit of a mess, but it heals up pretty quickly. And then you go on. And like I said, my system's been in for 25 years. It'll be in for another 100 years in Illinois, in Springfield, Illinois. This is what new construction might look like. This was a picture taken in Springfield. This was actually a guy I used to work with before I retired. You see, they were building the house, still putting the roof on when they were putting the loop field in the front yard. And of course, they didn't have nothing really to tear up there because nothing was finished yet. This is how many people it takes to put in geothermal. That's as bad as the jokes are going to get tonight. In fact, it's the only joke you're going to hear. We used to train heating cooling contractors in loop field installation, and we do these field days, and that's why these guys are all standing around with their hands in their pockets, just observing that part of the job that they usually don't do, but it's good for them to understand. So that's what that was. This is what the pipe looks at the bottom of the borehole, where the fluid's circulating. And then another way to put in loop field is with horizontally bored loop field. And this is increasing in popularity in some areas, and it offers some advantages, also some disadvantages to typical vertical loop field installation, which is still the most popular. The nice thing about using directional boring technology is that you can put the loop field in diagonally, you can put it in horizontally, you can do lots of different things, go around in a circle if you have to, move around trees and such, and it does a little bit less damage to the yard. Everybody has seen this type of equipment along roadsides, putting in fiber optics and water lines and sewer lines and the like. But you can use it for putting in geothermal loop fields too. And so this is what it might look like. You can see it's probably lunchtime here. They've put in the first loop down in the lower left-hand corner. And when they come back, they're going to start on the second one. And then eventually they're going to tie into the house in the background. And that's going to look something like this. Okay. And then there's the horizontal loop field. Pretty much the same idea as the vertical loop field. Remember mine in my front yard, except these loops are installed horizontally like this. And typically at a depth of 6-7 feet, And so why would somebody do this? Well, if you live out in a rural area and you've got maybe a 5-acre lot and you're building a new home, nothing's finished yet, this is a perfect way to install the loop field, save a little bit of money because it costs a little less, and you don't really care if you have to come in and trench or use a track hoe to dig your loop pit for the piping, because nothing's finished yet. So it provides another alternative. And then another alternative yet for those people who might be fortunate enough to have a big enough piece of property where they have a pond loop. If the pond is big enough, has the carrying capacity even through the worst drought, to carry a pond loop, geothermal loop field, that technology can work very nicely as well. So the loop is basically floated out, dropped into the bottom of the pond, and it chugs away and works perfectly well. So some of you have probably heard somebody say over time, oh, geothermal, it's for people who build new homes, or that doesn't really work in older homes, or geothermal doesn't work in churches or schools, or geothermal this or that or the other. Well, that is usually said by engineers who don't really design geothermal, or heating cooling contractors who don't do geothermal. And I can tell you, I've been around it a long time. Dave Buss would tell you the same thing, that you can make geothermal work in virtually any application, but it's like everything else. Some are easier and more obvious applications than others. Sometimes it is just so difficult, and difficulties are often make for more expensive installations. Sometimes it just doesn't make the most sense and maybe isn't even the best option, but it can work in virtually any application, and it is a great option for most people. And this picture was taken at a home that was built in Abraham Lincoln's day, south of Springfield, down by Verdon. It's an old farm home built in the 1860s. And if geothermal can be made to work in this house, it can be made to work anywhere. And this is your classic installation. You see the geo unit down in the lower left-hand corner with the pipes being connected to it. You see the white box with the little black circles. That's the flow center or the pumping system. And then you see the 2 water heater application, which is the classic geothermal desuperheater application. So the little water heater is nothing really but a buffer tank. That's the tank where the water is heated from the geothermal system. And then as domestic hot water is used in the home, it comes from the big water heater. And when the big water heater has to refill, it's not refilling with cold water, it's refilling with hot water. So especially in a season like air conditioning season right now, virtually 100% of the domestic hot water needs are being met by the geothermal system. Why is that? Remember, cooling is nothing but rejecting heat. So instead of rejecting it to the ground, we're rejecting it to the buffer tank to make free hot water. Geo also makes some hot water in the winter months. So it's important because, especially in a home where we have high water usage, lots of hot water usage, maybe with a big family, lots of kids, lots of laundry, lots of dishes to wash, it's a big energy user. And so it's a great way to take advantage of absolutely free energy. So there's a few things that we have to do differently with geothermal compared to conventional heating and cooling equipment. And so the very first start with every geothermal installation is to start with a load calculation. What is a load calculation? A load calculation is really nothing but going through the home or the facility that we want to condition, could be a business, an office building, if you would, any type of facility, but for most of us, it's a home. So going through the home and determining what the exact heating and cooling needs of the home are going to be. And you do that by running a load calculation. It's not guesswork. We want to be exact. Why is this important compared to conventional? Well, just about every home I've ever been in with a gas furnace, has an oversized gas furnace. It's just the way it is. Doesn't cost that much more to put in that way, and it's the safe way to do it. Geothermal doesn't work that way. It can't be oversized or undersized, because with either one, it just will not work properly. We want it to be right sized. Plus, this is expensive technology to put in. So we want to put in the absolute right system. So this is the first step, running a load calculation. And then we take the information that comes from that load calculation and we design the system. And how do we do that? Well, we design it by using the energy analysis. And every manufacturer has its own software for designing the system. And then it gives you really all kinds of great information on what the system is going to do, how it's going to operate, what the temperatures are going to be. It's going to tell you what the savings and what the energy usage is going to be, how it's going to compare to conventional over the course of a year. And these energy analysis printouts are extremely accurate. So every good geo project should have these two things, should have a load calculation up front, and then should have an energy analysis that follows right behind it. So we want to share a little bit about geothermal costs and incentives, because as you've probably heard, this is expensive technology to put in your home or business, and it just is. And it's expensive to put in, but it saves lots of energy over time. It saves our earth over time. And so that's why we've started this group buy. And so one of the centerpieces of the group buy is that depending upon our goal, if we meet our goals of the program and what goals we meet, there will be a volume discount or a rebate that comes back to all program participants. So let's say you do a system, you install it this fall. Come next January, you will get a rebate from your installing contractor in the program. And what will that rebate look like? Well, my hunch is it'll be about $150 a ton. And for most typical average type houses, that would be a $600 rebate that would come back to you probably a month or so after Christmas. And that's our goal. That's the beauty of the program. Now, it's important to say that every home is different, and that's why we can't say geothermal will cost this much. Our goal tonight is to give you an idea about that, but really every home is completely different. All the needs are different. Some homes won't need a new water heater. Some will need a new water heater. Some will need a new electrical panel. Some won't. It's literally all over the place. So it's really hard to say how much it costs because every project is different. But fortunately, we've got some really good incentives that exist. And at the end of the day, with the incentives that we do have available to us, just know that between 40 and 50% of the total installation costs will be met by, or can be met by ComEd and tax credits available from Illinois and the federal government. So the best incentive that we currently have is the federal renewable energy tax credit, or 30% tax credit. And this is available for the next 10 years. It's the same exact tax credit that's available for putting in a solar array. And everybody is eligible for it. Of course, you have to have an appetite. You have to pay some taxes, but it can be spread out over a number of years. And it's a tax credit, not a tax deduction. In addition, there's a $2,000 home efficiency tax credit that's available. And you can find information on all these incentives at irs.gov or energystar.gov. Pardon me. In addition, I mentioned that ComEd has some really, really good incentives. And ComEd currently has a $1,500 per ton incentive for residential geothermal. So a typical home, my house, for instance, is 2,950 square feet. I've got a 4-ton geothermal system. That's your typical type house. And with that system, you would qualify for a $6,000 rebate from ComEd if you use a ComEd approved contractor in the program. And all of the contractors in this program are also in ComEd's program. In addition, there's some others in ComEd's program as well. But that's a really great incentive. And then there are other incentives that you wouldn't even think about. But on ComEd's delivery charge, for instance, this is on your entire delivery fee for ComEd. This is the wires charge, if you would. Well, if you go to an all-electric home with geothermal, you reduce the delivery charge on a monthly basis. This is forever by about 25 to 30%. So this is a small amount of money every month, but it's just an example of how geothermal can pay for itself over time and the incentives that are available. So here's a typical scenario of what something might look like for your average type house. I should tell you that the two homes on the slide here that you see, the newer one on the top and then the older historic home, these are both homes in Urbana, Illinois. The top one was installed about a year ago through the Geothermal Urbana-Champaign Group Buy program. The other one is from year one of the program. Both really neat, tidy systems, and just for illustration's sake. But a typical system would be a 4-ton system. You see the description at the top of the slide. That might cost, just for example's sake here, let's say that costs $12,000 a ton or $48,000. Yes, this is expensive technology. You would qualify, let's say we're successful with this program and you qualify for an $800 rebate at the conclusion of our program year, $6,000 in the ComEd geothermal rebate, $14,400 in the federal tax credit, and the $2,000 home energy efficiency tax credit. And you see you've cut your $48,000 down to a little over half. So we've got great incentives available for helping meet these costs. And so at the end of the day, how might that compare to a conventional system? So let's say you were putting in an absolute cookie cutter gas furnace and code-based central air conditioner system. And just guesswork is, let's say that costs $12,000 to $14,000 to put in. Let's be conservative and say $12,000, which you've got an additional incremental investment after the tax credits and such of about $12,000. And so if you're thinking about dollars only as the incentive for doing this, well, how do you pay that back? Well, you pay it back over time by reducing your energy costs. Remember, you're going to pay a higher electric bill because you're now going to heat with electricity. But for most of us, the end game has been to eliminate your gas bill. And so I eliminated my gas bill. I still remember my last one from December of 1999, my last natural gas bill, $338, which was a lot of money 24 years ago. But the efficiency of geothermal for all aspects, heating, cooling, making hot water, operating the fan, total costs are half or less. And it's just the efficiency of geothermal. And remember, we're pumping water and blowing air, and all we're doing is moving energy with this technology. And so we're coming down the home stretch here. And so, what does it do to the value of your home? Well, I think it makes homes more valuable. I know it does in Springfield. I've had my own home appraised. I know I qualify for every energy efficiency point on the checklist that an appraiser does. Would it actually, if I went to sell my home, make my house more valuable? Well, I think so, having solar and geothermal in my home for the person who wanted that. And is that going to become even more important in the future? Well, you guys can answer that. I think so, because we're only going to become more cognizant of energy issues and energy costs as time goes on. I think that's common sense. And so our should make our property more saleable, more valuable. We've got another nice incentive at this program, and that's the financing option through the Clean Energy Credit Union. Some contractors also offer this, but it's available through this program. Anybody who installs geothermal through this program, you get a free membership to MREA, which allows you to finance through the Clean Energy Credit Union. And you'll find information online there as well. And then as we get to the end here, we want to talk a little bit about health and environmental benefits. Of course, it was mentioned at the top of the hour here that a couple of days ago, we had the Earth had its warmest day ever on history, we think. And wow, my wife, Joan, the other day commented to me as we were looking at the haze from the forest fires in Canada. She mentioned, boy, we sure have made a mess of our Earth, haven't we? And we just have to do something about the mess that we've gotten ourselves into. And if we want to do anything about climate change in the residential sector with our homes, really the answer is electrification, getting those forest fires out of our houses, our burning carbon-based fuels in our homes, natural gas and propane gas. If we don't get that out of our homes, we can't do anything in the residential sector. And it contributes about a third, roughly 35% of the carbon issues come from the residential sector. And really the answer is geothermal. It's the most efficient way to go, and solar. And you combine the two together, and it's just a match made in heaven. And it is absolutely the answer. Isn't it an expensive answer? Yes, it is. But if we want to do anything about climate change, this is the way to do it. This is an important slide. You'll see ComEd on the left side, and you'll see if we use geothermal, it's the amount of global warming pollution in the ComEd system. You'll see that in the lowest bar. And then you'll see if we use a propane furnace in the light blue, you'll see what that looks like. I mean, again, there's no comparison here. The other two are different utilities in the Midwest, but you see ComEd in the left one of the three there. And so there is just absolutely no comparison. This is really an important one for me. I mentioned my two granddaughters. I have 6 grandchildren. They're here at my home a lot. And when they come to my house, it's important for me to not have them breathing bad air in my home. And so we don't have gas appliances in my home. I just don't want that. And I don't want the bad air quality that's caused especially for young kids, that comes from gas water heaters, gas furnaces, gas cooktops, etc. I'm not a hater of people that use that technology. I just don't want that in my home. And because we know that's important, especially as homes get tighter and tighter and tighter, that's really important. So if you're interested in moving forward with geothermal, how do you go about it? Well, I'm not going to go through all these steps, but I will say that you start the process by going into and filling out the form, basically giving your name and email address in the form in the chat. I think Jeff's probably got it in the chat. You likely, unless you don't want it, will likely get an email from the program with a link to that. Fill that out, and then you'll see what the process is. Usually the first step is a phone consultation. If you are a good candidate for a geothermal project and you're still interested, I can tell you that the contractors in the program take care of every step along the way. They arrange for the loop field to be installed, the permitting, they walk through, and then at the very end, they teach you how to operate the system. They do the QA walkthrough. And I will warn you that number one, geothermal projects can be costly, and we don't want to sugarcoat it. This is expensive technology. You're putting a loop field in the ground in your yard, and that adds cost to the project. That's number one. Number two is don't expect that you're going to snap your fingers and have a geothermal system in tomorrow. So if your central air conditioning system fails, and we're in very hot weather, you might be able to find a heating cooling contractor that could give you a new system pretty quickly, but they aren't going to give you a geothermal system pretty quickly. There's serious, it's just a serious time commitment. And I will say, for most of you, if you're interested in doing geothermal, get started as soon as possible. If you get started right now, you'll have your system in operation for heating season. But it can take 2 or 3 months from start to finish to pull the permits, order equipment, get the loop field installed, and get the system operational. It just can take that long. And I want to give you all fair warning about that. That's just how it works. So what are the next steps? Well, you fill out the site assessment form. That basically gets the ball rolling, and then we go from there. Again, here's the contractors in the program. I can tell you a little bit about them. Down at the bottom is Top Tech. I think they're in the Northbrook area. They're a serious contractor, been in business for quite a while. They do geothermal. There's Advanced Geothermal in Elgin. They do both the loop field and the inside work. There's L&H Services down in Beecher, south of Kankakee. McDonald Renewable Energy, which is out in the southwest suburbs, out in the Carroll Stream area. Chicagoland Geothermal, they work all over in the city. They're both a loop installer and do the inside work as well. Ozone is out in the Aurora area. And then lastly, Area Mechanical and Gillies. It's basically the same contractor. Gillies does the residential work. They're out in the Rockford area, but they work across a wide geographic area. So those are the contractors in this group buy program right now. So with that, here's some contact information. You see my email address here. And if you need or want any information at any time, I would be tickled to death to help you with any of that. And I'd be glad to share that. David Weaver from CUB, and then Jeff Schneider from Midwestern Renewable Energy Association. But we're the three who kind of coordinate the program, if you would, the group buy program. So with that, Jeff or others, do we have questions? And I do want to apologize for getting knocked off, having my power go out. That's the first time that's happened to me, but one of those things. We still finished up at just after 7 o'clock. So that's it for me, unless we got questions, and I'd be glad to answer.
We definitely do have some questions in the chat. I can jump in and ask some of them to John. We got a great list of questions here from Zach, and I think some of them are worth asking asking everyone. Zach wonders, is it worth installing a geothermal system on a home that already has a solar system that is already covering a large majority of the electrical costs?
Sure, because well, it all depends what perspective. Are you talking from a dollars and cents standpoint? Or are you talking from an environmental standpoint? There's many different ways of looking at that question. So I'm not sure what the questioner is, what viewpoint he is looking at it from. But
I would just say, John, I would say that if he's using gas for heating, he would eliminate that bill, even though, and he would pay, also reduce the electrical cost on everything on his cooling. So there would certainly be additional savings, and certainly a big environmental improvement as well.
Well, a massive environmental improvement, and a significant dollars and cents savings as well. I mean,
Correct.
There's just absolutely, Dave is absolutely right there. And so I would always say, if you want to do what I've done in my home, which is put geothermal and solar in, the better way to go about it, I think, is to put the geothermal system in first and then size the solar array around that. But either way works perfectly fine. Just know that your electrical usage is going to increase on a year-round basis, but you're essentially eliminating or drastically reducing whatever gas usage. And for most people, the end game is getting gas out of the home. That would be for me anyway. So hopefully that helps, Jeff. Thank you, Dave.
Of course, yeah, I think that's a pretty good response there. We have a couple more that I would like to highlight from those questions. Here's one that I think this is probably a pretty simple answer, but maybe some other people were wondering, how do you keep the pipes from freezing when we get stretches of cold in the winter where the frost line goes down 40 plus into the earth? Maybe you could clarify a little bit about how cold it gets in the ground and all of that for everyone.
You want to tackle that one, Dave? Go ahead.
Sure. Typically, our pipes are all installed about 5 feet below the surface. And we also use an antifreeze solution in the pipes. And our systems are rated to operate down to 30-degree entering water. So when the system is installed according to the required specifications, those temperatures don't really affect us.
And at 40 feet under the surface,
40 inches.
Somebody threw out that number of 40 feet. At 40
I think
feet
that's
below,
40 inches, I believe.
oh, 40 inches. Okay.
I'm assuming.
I'm assuming too, but at 40 feet deep or at 10 feet deep, the earth temperatures just don't change much.
No,
From-
we're going to be 50 plus.
Yep. On a year-round basis, we know no season underground. Once we get down 5 feet below the surface, it never really changes. And so, yes, Dave mentioned there is a very, very light antifreeze solution that circulates through the piping system. For most systems, don't really ever really need that. And it's very, very weak antifreeze. Don't think of it in terms of the antifreeze that's in your car radiator. It has nothing in common with that. And it's environmentally very good.
Great. Thank you, guys. I'm glad we got to get to that question because I don't think many people really think too much about how cool or warm the earth below their feet gets. So thank you for clarifying that for everyone. Just got one more I'm going to highlight from Zach. He asked, is there any way to receive assistance navigating the process of finding and applying for all the incentives and credits, etc., that apply to a new geothermal system? I don't want to jump in on John or David, but I would say all of our installers definitely would take the lead on that part. They're all well versed in all the different incentives and doors to knock on, as it were, in terms of going geothermal. So I presume they would be the first person to ask that. Usually their salesperson or someone would sit down with you in a meeting or virtually to talk through all of your options. That's what I suspect the answer is. John, can you confirm?
Yep. And when you get a proposal from one of the contractors in the program, they should be providing you with the type of equipment that ultimately would be designed and installed in the home, assuming we're talking about a residential system, and then describing that and describing the cost. And then they should outline what the incentives and how those dollars would work, because it's really not that complicated. It might seem like it, but you can circle back with Dave Buss or John Freitag or Jeff Schneider or any of us, and we'd be glad to help. I mean, it's pretty easy thing. It might seem overwhelming because it's all new to you, but for those of us who work with it, it's not that complicated. And you definitely want to take advantage of them because it can be, an incentive of up to 50%, maybe even greater than that of your costs.
Right.
Absolutely. That's just the answer I suspected there, John. And to reiterate, if you're going geothermal with anyone, the installer will definitely know a lot. But if you do end up going geothermal with this program, not only will you have the resources of the contractor, you'll also have our whole team who will can help guide you through any of those questions that you may have. So All right, well, I think I've covered a lot of those questions. There's just one really more simple one right here. I think this will be a quick answer, and David did answer it. But Anne asked, is there a minimum system size? Can you talk about, the smallest you would want to go for a system, or anything about that?
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I mentioned on the chat that our systems go down to as low as 6,000 BTUs per hour, but typically in any kind of a home in this area, the lowest loads that I've seen would involve systems that might be as low as about 24 to 30,000 BTUs per hour. And we have equipment that is sized, specifically for those kinds of loads, if that's what it takes. And the loop fields are reduced in size accordingly, all based again on how much heating and cooling that house requires.
So that might be your typical 2-bedroom apartment or condo sized facility, or even smaller.
Or very tight, well insulated home, a super insulated home possibly. Yes. And that's the reason why it's so important for us to do the load calculation on every job, to make sure that we size it correctly for the application that's really there. We don't want to oversize it and make you pay more than you need to, and we certainly don't want to undersize it and make you wish you had a larger system, when it gets down to 10 below. So, that's the reason why we're so adamant about a proper load calculation.
Great. Thank you. Great answer, David and John. Appreciate that. We're getting close to 15 minutes after the hour, so I think we should maybe wrap up quickly. But there is one more very simple feel-good question that that was in the chat. David answered it, but I wanted to ask John for the group. Barb asked, what is the upkeep of a geothermal system? And you kind of alluded to it, that it's minimal, but if you can share that one more time, John.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was thinking, I don't think I really covered that much. And so one of the beauties of geothermal is that everything is either underground or inside your home or facility that you're trying to condition. There's nothing up on the rooftop. There's nothing on a concrete pad outside the home, out in the snow and ice and sun and wind and rain and hail and whatever else is happening. So the maintenance on geothermal tends to be relatively minimal. I think it's a good idea for most people to just have a service contract with one of these good contractors and have a technician who's well-versed come in and take an annual look, take a look at the loop field, how that's working. Dave, don't you agree with that? And that's what most people do. That's a good idea. But for the most part, there is just so little maintenance. The problems are far and few between. I know with my very first system that I put in 1999, I subsequently changed out the indoor part of my equipment back about 5 years ago, not because I had to, I just wanted to. And I wanted to have a little techier system. My old system, I didn't have a service call on it in 17 or 18 years. It's the way it is. And that's probably fairly representative. And it's mechanical equipment. It can break down. You can have problems, but for the most part, they're relatively rare. Dave, your comments.
No, I agree, John. And the only thing that really is a maintenance item on it is the filters. The filters do require regular maintenance and need to be changed or cleaned when they get dirty, whether that's once a month or once a year, depends on the house and the application. But they need to be maintained so that they don't get to a point where they restrict the airflow through the system. That's really the only maintenance per se that's would be a scheduled maintenance item.
I'm nutty about that. I like to do it every month if I can, just to be sure. But on any heating cooling system, that's important.
And I guess I would also point out at that point too that in this day and age, with environmental or indoor environmental concerns, and indoor pollution, there are some very high quality, high efficiency filters available that can filter all the air in your house as this system operates, and take out pollen and mold spores and even pathogens with the right kind of filter system. So that's something that a lot of people like to take advantage of with these kind of systems, because there's no flue or chimney or requirement for outdoor air to come in the house for ventilation air for the combustion process. And so we can maintain a much cleaner atmosphere inside the home with a geothermal system than you typically can with a conventional furnace.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that one. I always like to make sure we highlight that because it's a great feature of geothermal. Well, that covers all the questions that I found in the chat. I can hand things back to our Green Drinks team.
Okay, thank you so much. A great thank you to John and David and Jeff for an outstanding presentation to help simplify that for some of us a little bit more, and helps invite us to think further and hopefully look into that for our homes if we can.